So this morning I'm going to continue talking about the Heart Sutra. This is the sixth talk I've been giving on the Heart Sutra. Um, and this part goes like this: no wisdom and no gain, and thus the bodhisattva lives Prajna Paramita. With no hindrance in the mind, no hindrance, therefore no fear. Far beyond deluded thought, this is nirvana. All past, present, and future Buddhas live Prajna Paramita and therefore attain anuttara-samyak-sambodhi. So this weekend we're commemorating Memorial Day. All of the veterans are honored who fought in the various wars. But, if we really take these words of the Heart Sutra to heart, these wars wouldn't have occurred. But then I'll talk a little bit about the three poisons today that compel us to do all of these horrible things to each other. I think I was a precocious kid in some ways because when I was made to go to religious school when I was very young, I heard all these Bible stories, and I always had a bad feeling about them. For example, with Noah and the flood, I worried about all the people that drowned, not the people that were, I don't know, saved, I guess is the right word, because of their purity. And then we had all of these Passover Seders when I grew up, and the Jews were trying to free themselves from bondage in Egypt. And one of the things that happened was that the God would punish the Egyptians, and one of the things he did was he killed the firstborn of every Egyptian family in order to convince the Pharaoh to let the Jews go. And I worried about the innocent firstborn of the Egyptians as well as the bondage of the Jews. And then when I was in high school in Phoenix, the temple that my parents belonged to rented a movie theater where they were showing the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston portraying Moses. And the whole audience in this movie theater was Jewish. And there was a scene where the Red Sea parted and the Jews escaped from Egypt, and then the soldiers of the Egyptian army were following them, and then it closed up and drowned all of the soldiers. And this tremendous cheer went up in the theater. I mean, it was deafening. And I was, like, what are we cheering? We're cheering the killing of these people, from the wrath of God, So I kind of have a real sadness on occasions such as Memorial Day, just thinking about all the lives that were lost, just not for American soldiers, but also those from the other side who were opposed. And I think about the war going on in Ukraine, like right now, with these young men, you know, fighting each other, killing each other. It's very sad. But as it says here, with no hindrance in the mind, no hindrance, therefore no fear. But up to this point in the Heart Sutra, we've been talking about the nature of Prajna wisdom. You know, like the title is Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra. Prajna wisdom. And now we're going to talk about how the bodhisattva functions based on this prajna wisdom, which it says right here, there's no wisdom and no gain. So prajna wisdom is a functioning of the one body with no concepts or notions of what it is. So when we're hot, we sweat. We don't think about it. That's prajna wisdom. And when we think, we just think. That's prajna wisdom. When we think about thinking, then it might be something else in a way. But it's another form of prajna wisdom. Because the functioning of the brain is to think, and the functioning of the eye is to see. But when we enter into the realm of self-grasping thinking, then we need to start paying attention. And that's what when we're meditating, you know, quite often our mind goes off into all kinds of stories. Everybody loves dramas and stories, especially when we're the center of them. So we need to pay attention. Now, if I think of each part of my body as a separate entity with its own ego structure, then it's obvious that I'm deluded. The arm is not separate from the one body. It doesn't have a will of its own. The same with the leg and the neck. And to have such a notion, most people would consider to be foolish. And if I try to preach that I am one body, I don't think it would impress too many people, since everybody already knows each person is one body. However, if I were to say that everybody and everything is one body, it's more difficult to swallow. But since that's also so, it follows that there's no wisdom and no gain. So if we say no wisdom, it's the same thing as saying everything is wisdom. Just as a fish is not aware of the water and a bird isn't aware of the air, if everything is wisdom, we're not aware of that wisdom. When it's cold, we shiver, and that's wisdom. And when we let go of all ideas and concepts about wisdom, there's no wisdom. So I remember Bernie Glassman saying that the purpose of Zen is to realize the oneness and the interconnectedness of life, the oneness. So if everything is one body, what can be gained and what can be lost? In physics, we have various principles which are relevant for this discussion. One is a conservation of energy and momentum. So by applying the principle of conservation of angular momentum, a cat manages to always land on its feet when you drop it. You know, they had real slow motion pictures of cats, and if they twist part of their body one way, the other part twists the other way. So if they twist their tail counterclockwise, their body will twist clockwise, and so they can land on their feet. So a tailless cat learns how to twist other parts so that it lands on maybe 2 feet, not all 4 feet. So this principle was discovered of conservation of angular momentum by Isaac Newton in the 17th century. Yet cats were landing on their feet long before that. And even illiterate cats know how to land on their feet. So there's no loss of momentum and no gain of momentum. And Buddhists have been talking about prajna wisdom and the nature of prajna wisdom for 2,500 years. Yet to fully grasp it, we have to let go of our judgments, opinions, concepts. If we live in each moment, there's no gain. There's just what is at this moment. If we lose our wallet, there's no loss. If we find a $100 bill, there's no gain. It's just what it is. See, part of the problem is that we think that in order for us to gain, somebody else has to lose, that there's a limited pie. And that's what a lot of the fighting is about. So the bodhisattva lives Prajna Paramita. So Prajna Paramita is one of the 6 paramitas explicitly mentioned in the Heart Sutra. But the first paramita is dana, or giving. And in the context of practice, this means to let go, to give up our sense of self, and to give up our notions of a sense of self. And when we practice zazen, we let go, we give up our attachments. But if you're adding to them, that's not zazen. Now, when the Buddha was asked what he gained through all of his practice, all of his meditation, and all of his understanding, he says, I haven't gained a single thing, but I've let go of a lot of things. So this is what it means. A bodhisattva lives Prajna Paramita. Unencumbered. So, since we are everything, we lack nothing. In the Bible, it says to cast your bread upon the water, and you will find it after many days. It's in Ecclesiastes. So whatever bread we cast will come back. If we cast it with an open heart, that's what will return. And if we cast it with regrets or with anger, that's what will return. When the Dalai Lama was asked if he were to teach only one thing, what would it be? You know what he said? Karma. He said karma. That's what he would teach. So that's this Bible verse is karma. If you cast your bread upon the water, it will return. So what goes around comes around. That's karma. Now, can we change our karma, or is it predetermined? Well, if you're wondering about it, you have to think carefully about why you're here today, why you're practicing. And I've always said that if I didn't think that people could change, I wouldn't have been doing this for over 50 years. An amazing thing that if we really take care of whatever regrets, whatever negativity that we're harboring in our heart, we allow ourselves to totally feel it and release it as Prajna Paramita. Not only do we feel better now, but the way we think about our whole life changes. It's like we're changing our past. So we all have our story. But what's true? See, when I grew up, my father, sometimes he would get angry and punish me and my brother. Seems like he mellowed out by the time my younger brother and sister came along, my older brother and I always we knew the taste of his belt on our bottom. And once we grew up, my older brother, he thought our father was just out of control with rage. And I thought every time he hit me, I deserved it. I provoked it. I was the one responsible, you know. So we had very different stories, about our father. One was that he was out of the control, and the other was karmic retribution. So what was true? What's the true history? What's the true story? Well, he had his story and he had to deal with it. He spent a lot of time working on it, and I think he's finally let it go. So the next line says, with no hindrance in the mind, no hindrance and therefore no fear. So when we can give wholeheartedly, there's no hindrance. We're holding nothing back. And that gives rise to no fear. And fear is the most primitive emotion. It prevents us from doing so many things in our life. And on the cushion, it prevents us from letting go. It can prevent us from having healthy relationships. Usually when other emotions are controlling us, like anger or sadness or self-pity, there's usually fear underneath there somewhere. So in order for there to be no fear, we have to intimately know fear. We have to really become one with our fear. And it's neither good nor bad, it just is. Of course, there's healthy fear. Back in India, the monks would meditate in the forests, which were where tigers and other predators would prowl. And I think of the story of Soen Nakagawa Roshi, who lived in the last century and came to this country and has left an impact on the practice of American Zen. He was staying at a Zen center that he helped one of his successors founded in New York City. I think it was just east of Central Park. And they told him that it was a dangerous neighborhood and he shouldn't be going out at night. And so one night he just went out by himself. And I think he wandered around Central Park. And then he came back to the Zen Center and he had a couple of rough-looking guys with him, crude-looking guys, and invited them in and gave them tea and chatted with them and then said goodbye to them. And all of the residents there in the Zen Center, their mouths were hanging open, and they thought, oh my God, what's he doing? And then after the people left and he closed the door, he turned to the residents and he said, now don't you try that. You're not ready. So I think it relates to this, therefore no fear. Having no fear. These rough guys recognized it. So whatever hindrances we have, are summarized in the three poisons, which are greed, anger, and ignorance, or sometimes craving, hatred, and delusion. They're spoken about in different ways. And all of these arise up due to our grasping after a fixed self. But if we can let go of that, as the Heart Sutra says, let go of that hindrance of a fixed self that we have to aggrandize and protect, then these three poisons can transform into three virtues. So, ignorance can transform into wisdom, into seeing clearly. That's what wisdom means. To see things, the true nature of things, seeing their empty nature, their impermanence. Seeing things without adding our own spin to it. And when we can see that, that's what affects our karma, and that's what the Dalai Lama was talking about. Seeing the true nature is part of understanding our karma. And anger becomes determination. Determination to take care of injustice when we see it, to relieve the pain and suffering. In the world, but we have to act from that place of emptiness and prajna wisdom. That's the functioning of the bodhisattva. And then greed becomes compassion of the bodhisattva, to help all beings realize their enlightened self. So once we're able to let go of this attachment to self, greed, anger, and ignorance become the selfless desire for the whole universe to be enlightened. It's because we are the entire universe, and we want to be enlightened, to see clearly, to be of help where we can. And the next line says, far beyond deluded thoughts, there is nirvana. So in Buddhist philosophy, There are four basic delusions, which are divided into two categories: before enlightenment and after enlightenment or awakening. So the first delusion is a belief in permanence. As we know, everything is changing, everything's in flux, There's nothing that's not in flux. I just saw a video this last week of a huge solar flare. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, it shot out further than the diameter of the sun, But fortunately, it was projected away from the Earth, If it were projected toward the Earth, we could have had all kinds of communications blackouts, and maybe this far south we would have a beautiful northern lights, all of which is caused by all of these cosmic particles cascading through the atmosphere. So everything we look at, stars are evolving. And the planet, our planet, is just but a speck, And so each one of us is a microspeck, or a nanospeck, or a nanospeck. But then there's a delusion after awakening. That's a belief in impermanence. See? We can get stuck in that too. Becomes another belief. So how can we just be without having some belief that we have to have as a touchstone? I'll go back to Bernie Glassman, and I've mentioned this several times. He kept saying about everything, it's just your opinion, man. He said the Four Noble Truths are the Four Noble Opinions. It's a bit heretical, but still, we want to believe in something. So the second delusion, prior to awakening, is that we can find a state of bliss and happiness, perpetual bliss and happiness. Well, after awakening, the first teaching of the Buddha was that life is suffering, right? But there is a way, to ease the suffering. But still, it's your opinion. And the third is that I exist and that myself is reality. That's a delusion before awakening. After awakening, we believe there's no self. And you know what happens? That no self becomes a new fixed self. It's incredible. We can get stuck anywhere if we're not careful. We have to always pay heed. And then the fourth is a belief in purity, that there's something unstained that can be found. And of course, after awakening, the corresponding view is that nothing is pure. Because there is no purity, there is no impurity. So there is no wisdom and no gain and no loss. So if we cling to any of these deluded states after awakening, that's not what Buddhists call complete awakening or complete enlightenment. And as it says, therefore attain anuttara-samyak-sambodhi. That's what anuttara-samyak-sambodhi is. It's translated as supreme perfect enlightenment. It's a stage where the realization that any concept is a delusion and one is free of all delusions. So it's kind of an idealized state. And if we idealize it, then it's no longer anuttara-samyak-sambodhi. So what is it? How can we really be free? That's the challenge. So this world is nirvana. So that's what it says here. Far beyond deluded thoughts, this is nirvana. So this world devoid of deluded thoughts is nirvana. So we also have a koan that some of you may have done, which is samsara is nirvana. Samsara is a world of suffering. So the world of suffering is nirvana too. Or delusion is enlightenment. It's another koan. So hopefully in this talk, I've pulled everything away. Nothing to rely on. Nothing to depend on. As Hakuin said, not a tile over your head or a square inch of ground under your feet. Now that is frightening. That's a reason to be fearful. Even though it says no fear. How can we experience no fear in this kind of groundless place? Like Trungpa Rinpoche said that the bad news is that you're falling in space, and the good news is there's no ground. So all past, present, and future Buddhas live Prajna Paramita and therefore attain anuttara-samyak-sambodhi. So all of us are the Buddhas. This very body is the Buddha. This very land is the lotus land. And it always comes back to this one moment. What else is there? All of our thoughts, memories, projections, fears, pleasure, all comes down to this one moment. And this very moment determines how we live our life, moment after moment after moment after moment.